Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Wonder Woman 1984? Stick around and find out. Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Wonder Woman 1984. The synopsis on IMDb reads, rewind to the 1980s as Wonder Woman's next big screen adventure finds her facing two all-new foes, Max Lord and the Cheetah. There's a lot more that could be said. That's a really unhelpful synopsis. I think you get more from watching any of the trailers to this movie. It's I would describe it as very different from the original in its tone. I can only speculate, but I wonder if Zack Snyder's influence was much less a part of this movie, and the director, it was much more her vision for the tone and what she would like to create than it was when she directed the first movie. I don't know, but that's what I would speculate. It's a much lighter tone, which I think is exemplified in the opening action sequence, where the criminals that Wonder Woman is fighting are kind of just silly criminals, you know, and they are comically given their comeuppance by Wonder Woman, and rather than really feeling like a threat. And that doesn't connect with me as much. I like much more often in superhero movies in particular when there are dark realities that we as viewers or readers, whatever the medium might be, feel and relate to the wrongness of those dark realities, and we feel the need for those wrongs to be righted. And then it's much more satisfying and cathartic when a savior figure enters into the scene and makes the wrong things right, saves those who are being victimized, and gives justice to those who are doing horrible wrongs, you know. And so I really don't find action scenes like this satisfying, where the bad guys, the threats, are kind of comical, as opposed to really feeling like a threat that, as an audience member, I'm like, oh my gosh, someone needs to do something about this, you know. Wonder Woman is also undercover and in her costume for a significantly smaller percentage of the movie than in previous, well, maybe even in all the previous movies she's been in, except for maybe Batman vs. Superman, where she really came in just toward the very end in her suit. But less than, I think, the original Wonder Woman movie. I think even less than in Justice League, for sure. She was in costume much more often in that movie. It's there's the opening sequence where she fights the criminals in kind of a comical way, and which still looks cool in some ways, but it is not satisfying in the way that I wanted it to be. And then after that, it is over an hour before we see her in the Wonder Woman suit again, doing Wonder Woman-y things. Now, she does use her powers from time to time in the hour between those two scenes, but not in a really significant way, not in an action set-piece kind of moment. And for me, I'm just, especially in a sequel to a superhero movie, I'm like, that's not acceptable for my tastes. I understand that in a superhero movie that's an origin story, we're going to get at least about an hour up front before we see the person, the hero in their costume doing those iconic things that we go to the theater to see them do. But in a sequel for a superhero movie where an origin is not the focus, I really want to see them in costume much earlier, which they gave me. We got her in a scene near the very opening, really doing Wonder Woman-y things, again, but not in a satisfying way for my tastes. But then after that, for her to be absent from her costume, from her iconic appearance, for over an hour, I'm just like, that doesn't work for me. I'm not happy with that at all. And then also, when she does reappear in costume, and for much of this movie, she is significantly depowered because of plot elements. Not without powers, but her powers are significantly reduced. And I'm not a fan of that either, just as a device in general. I hate it when superheroes have a story where they out and out lose their powers, but even when their powers are reduced, almost every time it is not going to work for me, because I want to see them doing the superhero-y things that they are known for in the comic books, that they are known for as superheroes. And so I just do not like that plot device. There is, I have to say, and I'm very pleased to say, a very strong, heavy character focus. This is a very character-driven movie, and there are multiple characters that are really given solid treatments. Diana, as a character, feels alone since losing her love in the original movie, and she just feels like she is kind of always she's disconnected from the world around her, just kind of going through the motions. Yes, she is in undercover ways helping out as Wonder Woman now and then, and is kind of known as like this mysterious person that people are just hearing about, but she's disabling security cameras and stuff to keep herself undercover. But so she's not really known to anyone. There's no one in her life that truly knows who she is. And so you feel, I think, her loneliness, and I really appreciate them playing that up. But then when Steve re-enters into her life in a way that I won't reveal, they explore her relationship with Steve more, and some of why she loves him, but more of those scenes are about him being a man out of time and kind of having the role reversal of him being totally a fish out of water, as opposed to the first movie where Diana more often was the fish out of water. We do see in that first movie some of Steve Trevor when he's on Paradise Island or Themyscira or whatever they called it. We see some fish out of water stuff from him, but that is like the main shtick for his character in this movie. And Chris Pine does a wonderful job. I thought he was really funny, and I enjoyed, all the scenes that he was in. I thought it was great, just playing up his situation and their relationship. Barbara / Cheetah, played by Kristen Wiig, her character is dealing with insecurity, and the envy that she feels of Diana as someone that is so admired and respected and sought after by the men that are around her, and she really wants that kind of attention and that kind of appreciation and respect. And so we see kind of the depth she's willing to go to in order to get those things that she believes Diana has, and so I think that it's an interesting arc, and it's given its proper due, I think, to see that play out. Max Lord is themes of insecurity and fatherhood. He's got a really interesting arc. I think from what little I know of Max Lord in the comics, this is a much more interesting version. He has motivations that are more relatable and less mustache twirly, which I think the original Max Lord kind of is. He's a very different character with very different power concepts in this movie than Max Lord is in the comics. And I guess I won't go into any more detail than that. Not that it's a big surprise or reveal. I just don't feel like I need to go into it, so might as well let you experience that yourself. But it has some parallels in common with what his powers do in the comics, but still very, very different. And I think that there are fans of Max Lord that maybe will be disappointed by that. In some ways, I wanted him to feel like much more of an equal, much more of a threat, much more intelligent. We were lacking a villain in this movie that is really the intelligent mastermind that I think Max Lord is in the comics. He's certainly a manipulator in this movie, but he's not the mastermind that he is in the comics, and so I was missing that a little bit. Max Lord in the comics is associated with Wonder Woman in a very specific way. In the comic books, she kills Max Lord, and he's a very different kind of character doing very different things. And I think similar to Doomsday, when he showed up in Batman vs. Superman, I said to myself, don't you dare bring Doomsday into this movie and not have him kill Superman. Because Doomsday is good basically for one thing, and that's killing Superman. In stories where he has not killed Superman, he's only been less interesting since then, as when he's not the unstoppable force that Superman has to put down. And I think in similar ways, Max Lord, in his relationship to Wonder Woman in the mythos of the comics, is good for one or two very specific things, and they just don't take him in that direction. So it's an odd choice, because he has a very specific connotation when it comes to Wonder Woman in the comics and who he was in her story. And he is, although he has some things in common, there are some meeting points with what happens with Max Lord and Wonder Woman in the comics. He's taken in a very different direction. So it's apples and oranges. I really enjoyed it. I found it to be a powerful use of the character, but just know that you are likely to be disappointed if you're wanting to check all the boxes that Max Lord checks in Wonder Woman's life in the comics. I would have preferred one less villain in this movie. We didn't have the problem in this movie, for my tastes, that we had historically in many movies that increase the number of villains, which is you got too many villains, and so none of their stories are able to be delved into as deeply as they should be. It's just a very shallow representation of all the villains, and that was not a problem in this movie. I thought both villains got really great treatment, but it inflated the length of the movie. This movie is 2.5 hours long, 2 hours and 31 minutes if you include credits. And so its story time is roughly 2.5 hours long. That's really beefy. And a lot of that is given to character stuff, both of the villains, but then also to Diana with non-suit wearing related stuff, Steve Trevor. And so the percentage for which Wonder Woman is in the costume doing those iconic things I want to see in a Wonder Woman movie is significantly reduced. Maybe even the overall runtime where she's in the costume doing Wonder Woman things is less compared to the original Wonder Woman movie. I'm not sure, but it felt like it could be. In fact, there's a moment in one of the trailers where she is in the air lassoing lightning and using that to kind of propel herself around the sky. There is a similar scene to that I believe must have replaced that scene. And I think the lightning thing was cooler, and we didn't really get to see that in this movie. So I don't know what decisions were being made. The movie was delayed at one point, but that seemed to be because of COVID. On the other hand, they might have taken advantage of that delay and done some things like some reshoots. There's a final kind of epilogue scene that takes place during the Christmas season that makes me wonder, okay, was this specifically part of reshoots that were done because they knew the movie was getting delayed anyway? And so, hey, why not tie it to the Christmas season since it'll be coming out then and make it have a Christmassy moment in it? So I kind of just wonder what maybe happened to this movie, both in pre-production, potentially with less Zack Snyder involved, and in post-production with reshoots once they knew a delay was going to be happening. I'm just very curious. But anyway, I would have preferred one less villain. Now I like both of these villains, but pick one and then do one more Wonder Woman movie and use the other villain in that one and give them all the attention that you gave them in this movie. That's what I would have preferred. And I wanted escalated Wonder Woman action, and I really don't think it was escalated at all. In fact, if anything, it took a step back because of her depowered state. So I felt like it just kind of took a back seat, which is unfortunate. Now, as far as the cast performances go, Gal Gadot is a valid Wonder Woman to me. I've settled into her version, and I like her, but her physicality is noticeably lacking to me in this movie, as it was in past movies. I feel like she is not in full command of her body. In past movies, I can tell when either a stunt woman or a CG version of Wonder Woman takes over the role, because suddenly Wonder Woman is moving in these action moments, running or doing, fighting sequences and stuff in a way that just feels much more in command of her own body than Gal Gadot seems to be in the brief moments of action that we see her actually doing herself. I also noticed in some wire work in one or two scenes, and also when she's in her golden armor, that she just doesn't seem as in command of her body and what she's doing. I think that she has a sense of grace, or maybe poise, it would be a better word to say, that you would want, I suspect, in a certain people, Wonder Woman's different for everybody, but I think some people think of Wonder Woman as beautiful and has great poise, and so she's got that. This is going to sound insulting, I don't mean it to. She's got that runway model quality when she walks around and stands and presents herself that maybe a lot of people would want or feel is necessary for Wonder Woman. That's not a high priority for me. For me, I want to see her more as a warrior and using her body more as a warrior, and I just don't feel Gal Gadot is really able to bring that in the way that I want. Kristen Wiig is great, I think, as Barbara, Minerva, and Cheetah in this movie. Even as she becomes more powerful and confident, she still carries scenes well. So of course she's doing the Kristen Wiig insecurity thing wonderfully, but I was pleased that she also carried those scenes where she is stronger and confident and maybe even a little bit menacing. I liked what she did there. But like Gal Gadot, Kristen Wiig is certainly helped by the editing in action scenes, and so I didn't feel like I was necessarily getting what I would want from a physical performer in the role of Cheetah all the time. But I think the editing kind of like downplayed Kristen Wiig's potential physicality weaknesses more than it did for Gal Gadot in this movie. I think that the editing in past movies with Zack Snyder's Batman vs. Superman, and then what we saw in the Joss Whedon, at least, cut of Wonder Woman, I felt that the editing did a good job, and anything that Gal Gadot did that was not fully in command of her body, most of that hit the cutting room floor. Whereas in this movie, I feel like some of those instances where Gal Gadot was not in command of her body were left into the cut, if that makes sense. And so anyway, yeah, I felt like more of what Kristen Wiig maybe was lacking was probably left on the editing room floor. Pedro Pascal plays a vulnerable, even pathetic Max Lord in this movie. As I said earlier, very different from the comics. By the end of the movie, I really appreciated both his performance and the writing for his character. He gave me really a tearful moment as a father of two boys. Specifically, I watched it again just before recording this, specifically because of his performance. And so I really appreciate really what he did throughout this movie, but especially toward the end of it, and in then some brief moments throughout where we see that this more vulnerable and pathetic side of his character that I can relate to as a dad who feels insecure, who, like Max Lord in this movie, of course wants to be loved and appreciated and recognized and all that kind of stuff. And so there was a lot I could relate to, both because of the script and then a lot because of Pedro Pascal's performance here. So really appreciated what he did. As far as stunts and visuals, I'll just briefly comment. The CG in this movie is okay, but I want something that's a bit more convincing or with a bit higher bar from a superhero movie. The Wonder Woman action I felt like was better in previous appearances, whether that's Justice League or the original Wonder Woman movie or Batman vs. Superman. I just was not feeling the action as much in this movie. The visuals and action, I think, took too much of a backseat for me, and so I was disappointed in that regard. As far as the music goes, I don't always comment on music, but I will say that the Wonder Woman theme that has that kind of tribal driving sound to it, that was introduced when she was introduced in Batman vs. Superman, felt included out of obligation, not to define her character. I felt a little bit of the same way when they used it in the original Wonder Woman movie, as if they wanted to try and create their own theme for her, but recognized, well, this was the theme that introduced her, so we have to stick it in one or two times somewhere. And I felt even more in this movie like it was something that was being used out of obligation. I really would have liked the feel of that theme, that style of music, to be represented in much more of the score throughout the movie, to give that kind of that more tribal, aggressive warrior kind of feel to her action scenes, but not really the case in this movie. I also want to say that if you watch this via HBO Max, instead of seeing it in the theater, be aware that it seems, in my experience, to be optimized for stereo. We watched this using our home theater, and really found that the dialogue was muffled in some strange ways. I kept changing settings and stuff like that, and finally what we landed on that helped the dialogue really kind of come out and be clearer was just the stereo setting on our home theater, which is a real shame. So in that regard, probably not the best way to see this movie. I assume, though, that the home video version, the proper home video Blu-ray version, will be more properly optimized for home viewing. So just be aware of that if you're planning on watching it through HBO Max. Now, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? I think so. The movie deals with identity and finding identity in accomplishments, in what people think of us. The longing to be seen, to be loved, to be appreciated is expressed in the stories of Diana, in Cheetah, and in Max Lord. All three of these characters are dealing with that longing in different ways and making different choices in response to that longing. And so what we see in this movie, also it broadens out, and we see a wide variety of other side characters that are also pursuing that desire to either be secure or to be seen, to be appreciated, to be valued. And we see how pursuing those things can cause us to be selfish and to hurt others. And I think as geeks, this is certainly something that's relevant to us. We very often feel underappreciated and unseen and want recognition, want love and acceptance, but we also can be unaware of how our pursuit of that selfishly makes others uncomfortable or even hurts other people around us. And so I feel like in a number of ways, but in those ways in particular, we see in this movie an honest look at the tragic human condition, and how there is evil in us that is often motivated by this longing that we feel, and we don't know how to properly pursue because we are not in tune with how our Creator made us and what He desires for us to be and to do in this life. So, I think there's some great potential springboards for thought and conversation here. All right, now, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, okay, it's worth 1 month of HBO Max if you sit down and watch it with your family. I don't think you want to pay for a month of HBO Max just to watch it by yourself. But as a family event, if you factor in watching it with your wife, with your 2 boys, and yourself, that's 4 tickets. It's definitely a better deal to get this through HBO Max. Be aware that the sound is optimized for stereo, and so it's not going to be a proper home theater viewing experience, but I think you're still going to prefer that over having, going to the theater and all the things that you don't like about that experience. But, otherwise, you might consider just waiting to rent this when it comes to home video, when it's properly optimized for home theaters, and you'll pay a lot less for it. It's not something you really need to run out and see right now, but if there's other things on HBO Max that have your attention that you want to check out, then, in that case, that I suppose it would be worth it. I will likely want to add it to my collection eventually. As a movie in general, Peter, it's one you will find powerful and enjoyable in a variety of ways, but it's not really the Wonder Woman movie you wanted. Much like the Christopher Nolan movies were really great films, really well-made films that you could see and comment truthfully, these are very well-made movies and have some powerful moments. But like those movies, this one is also not the superhero movie, the Batman movie, the Wonder Woman movie that you really wanted to experience. You're going to feel let down in that respect. All right, this one's rated PG-13 for sequences of action and violence. Those are my thoughts. I would love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. Anything you want to do to share this content, I would really appreciate it. And I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We've got a ton going on here at Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central, including our in-depth Bible study for geeks, movie, game, and other entertainment reviews or commentary, live streams, Christian geek news, original audio dramas, and tons more. And on top of all that, you can become a Spirit Blade insider with an influential voice and get access to exclusive content and rewards. It's your involvement as a patron that will keep all of this going and growing. So I want to thank you for your consideration in that. For more information, please check out our Patreon page through the link below at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Thanks for listening.